Welcome back to Building Your Life podcast with John Browning. My name is Doug Sandler from Turnkey Podcast Productions. Today, John, we're not going to talk about your grandkids all day today, are we? Maybe we are. I don't know. I like your grandkids. Maybe we should talk about them all day today.
No, it's tempting for me. I'm a little bit biased there, just a little.
So one of the things that we probably could share, which would be really helpful to those that are in our community, is this thing called, is it called sequence of returns? Is that what it's called? Okay.
Yeah, it's like super important and not often talked about.
Now, is this something that only someone that was focused right now on retirement would want to think about, or is this something that we should talk about and think about our entire strategy during, the planning part of the strategy of getting towards retirement?
A great question. It is something that you should be aware of and plan for from the very beginning. You should know that this is coming up, and sequence of returns is really different for everyone. So it may be more important as you get towards retirement, but it also might be important as maybe you have kids and they're going to college, you need to fund that, or maybe you have a big vacation or some other goal that, again, this is about building your life, not just your portfolio. So when do you need those returns?
Okay. So if we could, for those that are in our community that have no idea what sequence of returns even means, why don't we start by defining what that is, and then we can talk about the different aspects of sequence of returns.
Sure. So the idea behind sequence of returns is, think for a minute with me, and this happened to some people, so this is like no joke, right? So during 2022, or pick your poison, right? I mean, you could say during 1994 or 2000 or 2008. What if you were invested entirely in the equity market because you wanted those higher returns, and you needed to retire during 2022? Or maybe you just retired in 2020 or 21, and 2022 happened and you had all these equity securities that might be paying you a dividend, but current income suddenly becomes a real problem, and you may have to be selling off your the equity portion of your portfolio at a time when it is down 20, 30 or more percent.
Wow. Okay.
That's the problem with the risk of sequence of returns.
All right. So I'm assuming we're going to go somewhere in the area of diversifying your sequence of returns, just like we're diversifying our investment strategy when we're putting money in, how we're going to pull it out. We have to diversify that as well.
That's exactly correct. And that's not the whole story, right? But that is correct, what you just summarized there.
Okay, so let's talk about it then. How does one know if we are strategizing properly when it comes to what our sequence of returns is going to be at some later point in our life?
Right. And here's where you get into this other question, right? Is it that, and many of you listening now have heard about the 60-40 portfolio, right? That's a common term out there. What that means is that, and it's kind of an old idea that frankly did not work that well in recent years.
It's probably one that I have followed then.
Right. It's like 60% of your portfolio should be in equity securities and 40% should be in bonds. Doesn't talk about what type of bonds. It's one of those things that I talk about that simplifies things, but unfortunately, in my opinion, it simplifies it too much. So I want to keep things simple, but not oversimplify things. That's my goal with folks. So
okay. All right. So let's talk about it then. What would we, in your opinion, want to share if someone had 10 minutes to listen to you and hear what you had to say? How can we share enough information with them to get them at least curious about what the sequence of returns is all about for them?
Yeah, so there's several ways that you can approach this. It all depends on your risk parameters, and of course, this is not investment advice. It's just opinion and information. And one of the ways that you can do that is with an annuity or a life insurance policy that you can borrow from at certain times. The other way to consider it is, how much cash do you need in the next 12 months? And that amount of cash, not necessarily, people expect me to say whatever you need for the next 12 months, you should keep in a cash instrument. It's actually not 100% true. If you have other securities, they may be bonds, they might be structured products, they might be equity securities that are paying dividends. They could be any number of ways to generate cash, but your cash position plus the expected income from all of those other instruments should equal your next 12 months of cash needs. Then at least you can pick your time better to maybe sell some assets that might be more volatile to the downside. You can at least pick your time to do that. And it also gives you some more time to get some income producers in there.
How did you pick 12? Oh, sorry, go ahead. You were going to keep going there. Keep going.
No. I like that question though. How did I pick 12 months?
Yeah, how did you pick 12 months? Because I've heard so many different things along the way. Hey, look, just make sure you have 90 days worth of cash in the bank for emergencies. Now, it doesn't give you long enough time for the market to recover in 90 days, but a year seems to be enough to at least see the horizon and what's going to happen. Is that part of it?
That's part of it. And this is different from your emergency fund. To me, your emergency fund is, yes, that 90 days, or pick your time period. I like 90 days. 90 days in case something catastrophic happens, an emergency. Hence we call it our emergency fund. That is sort of over and above, and that doesn't have to be in absolute cash. That can be in very short-term instruments that's earning you a little bit more than just cash in the bank, right? Cash in the bank, you're essentially, look at that as you are losing money to inflation.
Yeah, cash in the bank is right now. I mean, even on a good return of a checking account or savings account, you might be able to get 4%, maybe if you're lucky. But most people are under 1% still. They're just not. Banks just aren't paying. They're not volunteering to give you any extra money if they don't have to.
Right. Yeah. If you shop around, you can find that 4%. But even that, if you look at where we get CPI, another CPI print here this week, it's running at 6-8%. So that is losing money as far as real purchasing power goes. So that your emergency fund is a little different than your daily living needs. I talk about the personal paycheck protection program that you put in place instead of the government.
That's good.
And having your own personal paycheck protection plan is what we're talking about when we talk about sequence of returns and timing your cash flow. And I'm going to add one more layer here, where that cash flow is coming from. What account is it coming from? Is it coming from your taxable account? Is it coming from your annuity? Is it coming from your IRA, your 401k, your pension, your Social Security? Where are all those buckets feeding in? And this, of course, gets into, when do I take my Social Security, which is a whole different topic.
Right. And it seems like some of those things that you just mentioned, at least from my layman's perspective, some of those things that you mentioned are pre-taxed accounts. So I can't take anything from a 401k without or an IRA or any of those without a significant penalty. I don't want to ever use that money until I'm in a position to do it without the penalty. Is that how you would look at it too?
I would tend to look at it like that, and that's, you can, right? People say you can't do it. You can, but you take an extra 10% on top of the taxes that you're already going to have to pay. And there have been clients that had some sort of calamity that I encourage them, hey, rather than go into credit card debt, which is 16, 18, 20% interest, rather than do that, it might be, maybe it's better. You got to do the math problem and see if it's better to take from your retirement account, take that, tax it, take the 10%, and then start rebuilding, right?
Is there a time when sequence of give me sequence of
returns?
Is there a point where sequence of returns matters more than other times? Like, is it matter as much in my pre-retirement or when I'm in my accumulation phase as opposed to in my pulling it out phase?
Definitely, as far as the logical side and the math side of investing, it matters more when you are in retirement and you're actually using your funds You're no longer getting that paycheck. Of course, you're getting maybe a Social Security check, or maybe if you're fortunate enough and you're old enough to actually have one, or work, there are still some professions where you get a pension.
Pension.
So maybe that's coming in. But in retirement, it's definitely very important to pay attention to those sequence of returns.
All right. So what would you want someone to know when it comes to sequence of returns if they were approaching you for the first time right now?
So if they're young and they're nowhere near retirement, then I would say you don't have to worry too much about it, but you do need to plan for it. You do need to start planning for it now, and that you'll put you way ahead of the game when it actually really matters. If you're within 5 years of retirement and you're sitting in all equity securities, then we need to chat and we need to rearrange some things so that when you're retiring in 5 years, there is something starting to pay you and starting to be that personal paycheck protection program for you. And the reason I picked 5 years is there has been no time in modern history where the stock market has been down for 5 years in a row. There's been very, very few periods when the stock market has been down more than 2 years in a row. Very few. So some people use 2 years. I like to be a little bit more conservative and have yourself ready to weather a 5 year.
So somebody comes to you and they say, John, just when can I retire? is that's all based upon the decisions that they have made earlier in their life, but that's the reality of that. Probably many of the questions that people are asking you, is it ever a time that I can retire and be able to afford to be able to retire?
Yeah, I get that question, I'd say almost every day. That's just probably the most common question, and really goes back to the book, Build a Life, Not a Portfolio, and planning ahead of time. But what I like to encourage people, that it's never too early, and I think people understand that, but also it's never too late. I get people that are super depressed that are like 55 years old, and they're coming to me and like, oh man, did I mess up? Or, oh man, I didn't mess up, but man, life just happened. And I'm like starting over at 50. That's going to be my next book, starting over at 50.
The best time to plant a tree is right now. It was 20 years ago, but right now is the best time, the next best time to plant that tree. If you want to get more information about John and the things that he does and how he does them with his clients, just text LIFE, LIFE, to 321-421-5213. You'll get John's digital business card and a whole bunch of ways that you can connect with John and his team. John, thanks for sharing again. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up today?
That's it. I'm looking forward to next time.
All right, let's get out of here. See you guys again next week.